On a quiet Saturday morning, Emma Thornton stood at the gates of the cemetery, her heart heavy with sadness. It had been exactly 1 year since her husband, Daniel, passed away, and today was the day she visited his grave, just as she did every year. The air was cold, and the sky was overcast, mirroring the gloom that had filled her life since his death. For 12 months, Emma had struggled to move forward, finding it hard to let go of the memories of their life together. Every corner of their home still echoed with the warmth of his presence, and every object, his old books, his worn-out shoes, reminded her of a love that had been lost too soon. As she made her way through the rows of graves, her footsteps slow and deliberate, she couldn't help but think of how things might have been if Daniel had been there beside her. He would have made her laugh, wiped away her tears, and held her through the hardest moments. Now she was left to face it all alone. When she reached his grave, she knelt down beside the stone marker, running her fingers over the engraved name, Daniel Thornton. It still felt unreal, as if he might walk up behind her at any moment and call her name with that familiar voice that she missed so much. Emma closed her eyes and whispered a prayer, asking for peace, for herself and for Daniel. It was a ritual she had done every year since his passing. The cemetery was peaceful, with the soft rustling of leaves from the nearby trees, the only sound in the air. The scent of the earth and the fresh grass felt oddly comforting, like it was grounding her, reminding her that life, no matter how painful, goes on. But just as she was about to stand up and leave, something caught her eye. At the foot of Daniel's grave, there was a young girl. She couldn't have been older than 12, maybe 13. She was kneeling, her back to Emma, with her hands folded in front of her. Emma hesitated for a moment, wondering who this girl could be. There were no other visitors around. The cemetery was mostly empty today, as it often was on weekdays. The girl was different from the usual visitors. She wasn't an older relative or a friend of the family. Emma squinted, trying to make out the details of the girl's face. She had dark skin and long, curly hair that framed her face. She looked peaceful, almost like she belonged there, but Emma couldn't understand why. For a moment, Emma stood still, watching the girl as she whispered something softly, a quiet prayer or perhaps a few words of her own. Emma felt a strange unease crawl up her spine. Why was this child here, and why was she at Daniel's grave of all places? Emma had never seen her before, and she couldn't fathom why she would be here now. Curiosity began to replace her initial discomfort. Was this girl somehow connected to Daniel? Had he kept a secret from her, perhaps a child from his past, that Emma never knew about? She couldn't help but feel a sudden, sharp pang of doubt and confusion. Her mind raced with questions, but she remained silent, unsure of how to approach the situation. The girl hadn't noticed her yet, and Emma wasn't sure what to say. Eventually, Emma took a step forward, clearing her throat softly to get the girl's attention. She watched as the girl turned around slowly, her wide eyes meeting Emma's. She didn't look scared or surprised. Instead, there was a quiet sadness in her gaze that made Emma's heart ache. The girl stood up slowly and smiled faintly, though her eyes still seemed distant. Emma tried to calm the rapid beating of her heart as she opened her mouth to speak. "Excuse me, dear," Emma said, her voice shaky at first. "I'm sorry, but who are you?" The girl's expression didn't change. She simply lowered her gaze to the ground, fidgeting with the hem of her jacket before speaking softly. "I'm Ava," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I came to see someone." She paused, glancing back at Daniel's grave, then meeting Emma's eyes once more. Emma's brow furrowed, puzzled by the girl's strange response. "And who might that be?" she asked, her voice still soft, but filled with a mix of confusion and concern. The girl didn't immediately answer. Instead, she just stood there, looking at the grave as if searching for the right words. Emma's heart fluttered in her chest, and for the first time in a long while, she felt uneasy in the place she thought she. Emma stood there, unsure of what to say next. The young girl, Ava, had introduced herself with such quiet confidence, but the situation felt strange. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this encounter, something she wasn't understanding. Ava didn't look like anyone from their circle of family or friends, and Emma couldn't think of any reason why Daniel would have known a young girl like her. Still, Emma wasn't one to jump to conclusions, so she took a deep breath and tried to steady herself. She needed to know who this girl was and why she was at Daniel's grave. After a long pause, Emma asked, "How did you know Daniel?" Her voice trembled slightly, though she tried to keep it steady. Ava seemed to think for a moment, as if deciding how to respond. "He was a good man," Ava finally said, her voice soft but sincere. She looked at the grave for a moment before continuing. "He helped me and my mom a lot." The words were simple, but they struck Emma with a sense of confusion. Daniel had always been kind-hearted, but she didn't remember him ever talking about helping a family in need. He had volunteered in the community, yes, but this felt different. Why would Daniel have kept this part of his life from her? Emma found herself growing more curious, but also more unsettled. She took a step closer, still trying to make sense of things. "What do you mean?" Emma asked, her voice gentle now, though her mind was racing. "What kind of help did he give you?" Ava hesitated, her eyes shifting as if trying to gather the right words. "He helped my mom when she was having a hard time," Ava said softly. "He always made sure I had what I needed, like books for school, and he came to see me dance sometimes. He promised he'd help me with college too." Ava looked up at Emma, her eyes wide with a mix of hope and sadness. "I was supposed to see him again, but he—" She trailed off, her words hanging in the air, heavy with emotion. Emma's heart tightened as she listened. This wasn't just about charity or a passing kindness. Daniel had been involved in this girl's life in a way Emma never knew. The fact that Daniel had made promises to this young girl, promises to help her with her future, hit Emma harder than she expected. She stood there for a moment, trying to process everything, but she couldn't stop the flood of questions that filled her mind. "Why didn't he ever tell me about you?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She didn't mean for it to sound accusing, but the question had slipped out before she could stop herself. Ava looked down at her feet, clearly uncomfortable. She shifted from one foot to the other before finally looking Emma in the eyes again. "He didn't want anyone to know," Ava said quietly. "He said he didn't need thanks, that he just wanted to help." Emma's mind reeled. She never would have guessed that Daniel was involved in something like this. All the years they had spent together, and yet it seemed there had been a side of him she had never seen. It wasn't as if Emma had ever doubted his character. But this was something completely different. This was a level of generosity and selflessness she hadn't known about. And here she was, standing in front of a young girl who had known her husband in a way Emma hadn't. Emma tried to steady her emotions. This wasn't about jealousy or betrayal. It was about understanding who Daniel had truly been. She had to admit that, in that moment, she felt like a stranger to her own husband. Had he been so good, so kind, that he kept this hidden to protect her from the weight of his actions? Or had he simply believed that his acts of kindness didn't need recognition? As Emma stared at Ava, her mind raced with conflicting feelings: curiosity, confusion, and even a little resentment. But beneath all that, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of respect for the girl standing before her. Ava had loved Daniel in her own way, and Daniel had made sure she felt seen and cared for, even without Emma knowing. The realization slowly sank in. There was so much more to her husband than Emma had ever realized. Finally, Emma broke the silence. "Thank you for telling me," she said, her voice soft. She wasn't sure what else to say, but it felt like the right thing to say. Ava nodded, her eyes shining with a quiet sadness. "I have to go now," Ava whispered, "but I'll always remember him." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving Emma alone at the grave, her mind swirling with 1,000 thoughts. Emma watched her go, wondering how she could ever have known the full story of the man she had loved. After Ava walked away, Emma stood frozen in place, her eyes lingering on the spot where the young girl had been. The chill in the air seemed to grow colder, and a heaviness settled in her chest. Emma's mind was spinning. She replayed the conversation over and over, trying to make sense of everything. Who was this girl really? How had she come into Daniel's life without Emma ever knowing? The more Emma thought about it, the more questions flooded her mind. She had known Daniel for years. They had built a life together, shared dreams, and faced challenges side by side. But never once had Daniel mentioned Ava or her mother. Emma felt a strange mix of confusion and discomfort. Had he kept this part of his life hidden from her, or had she simply never asked the right questions? Her thoughts turned to the promises Daniel had made to Ava, to help her with school, to attend her dance recitals, to be there for her in the ways that a father might. Emma couldn't recall ever hearing Daniel speak about any of this. It made her wonder. If Daniel had been involved in Ava's life like this, why had he kept it a secret? Was it because he didn't want to burden her with the knowledge? Or was it something else, something Emma wasn't seeing? Emma walked slowly back to her car, her feet dragging with the weight of the confusion that pressed on her chest. She didn't know what she was feeling, hurt, betrayal, or something else entirely. Her relationship with Daniel had always felt open and honest. They had shared everything, or so she thought. But now, this new information made her question how much she really knew him. Was there another side to Daniel, one she had never been a part of? When she got home, Emma sat down at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the cup of coffee she had poured for herself. She hadn't even touched it. The house was silent, and the emptiness that filled it seemed louder than ever. She had always felt Daniel's presence here, even after he was gone, but now the silence felt heavier. It was as if the walls themselves were holding secrets she had never suspected. Unable to let go of the questions swirling in her mind, Emma decided she had to find out more. She couldn't just leave it like this. This new piece of the puzzle needed to be explored. If Daniel had truly been helping Ava and her mother, then Emma needed to know how and why. Was it just an act of charity, or was there something deeper between them? The next morning, Emma took a deep breath and made up her mind. She would find out who Ava really was and what her connection to Daniel had been. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something important that she was missing, and she wasn't going to let it go until she had the answers. Emma reached for her phone, dialing the number of the community center that Ava's mother, Latoya, had mentioned the day before. It was a small local center that helped underprivileged families, providing after-school programs, mentoring, and more. Emma had heard of it before, but it wasn't a place she had ever visited. She had always been focused on her own life, her own responsibilities, and had never thought about the struggles other people might be facing. After a few rings, the phone was answered. Community Center, how can I help you? Emma took a deep breath before speaking. Hi, my name is Emma Thornton. I'm trying to get in touch with a woman named Latoya. She mentioned that my husband, Daniel Thornton, had volunteered there. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line, and Emma's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure what she had expected, but it wasn't this moment of pause. Finally, the voice on the phone spoke again. Yes, I know Latoya. She works with us here. I'll transfer you to her. Emma held her breath, her nerves buzzing in the silence that followed. She didn't know what to expect from Latoya, but she was certain that this conversation would give her the answers she needed. She had to know more about Daniel's connection to Ava, and why he had kept it from her all this time. When Latoya answered, her voice was warm but cautious. Hello, this is Latoya. How can I help you? Emma quickly introduced herself again, explaining her reasons for calling. I'm looking for some answers about my late husband, Daniel. He helped you and your daughter, didn't he? Latoya's tone softened, though there was still a hint of sadness in her voice. Yes, Daniel helped us for a long time. He was a good man. He did a lot for us, but I didn't want anyone to know. I thought it was better that way." The weight of Latoya's words hit Emma like a wave, and she felt a deep ache in her chest. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the answers she had sought, but they felt heavier than she had imagined. Emma's voice trembled slightly as she spoke again. I didn't know about this. I never knew Daniel was helping you." The next few days were a blur for Emma. Her thoughts were consumed by what she had learned about Daniel. The realization that he had been helping Ava and her mother for so long without ever telling her left her feeling lost. How could she have missed something so significant? They had shared everything. At least, that's what Emma thought. But now, it seemed like there was a whole side of Daniel that she didn't know about, a side that was filled with compassion and selflessness. Emma spent hours going through old letters, photographs, and even the emails she had once exchanged with Daniel. She didn't know what she was hoping to find, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there were clues hidden in the memories they had made together. She kept searching for something, anything, that would explain why Daniel had kept this part of his life from her. As the days passed, Emma grew more determined to understand the full extent of Daniel's involvement with Ava. She had spoken to Latoya, and while the conversation had been eye-opening, it had only raised more questions. Latoya had told her that Daniel had always been there for them, helping with groceries, giving financial support when they needed it, and even attending Ava's school events, like a father would. It was all so overwhelming for Emma. She had never once suspected that Daniel had been that involved in their lives. In an attempt to piece everything together, Emma decided to visit the community center where Latoya worked. She felt like it was the only place where she might be able to uncover more about Daniel's connection to Ava. The community center was located on the edge of town, a small building that had always seemed like a quiet corner of the world to Emma. She had passed it countless times, but had never given it much thought. When Emma arrived, she was greeted by a kind woman who introduced herself as Carla, a volunteer at the center. Emma explained that she was looking for more information about Daniel's time at the community center. Carla nodded, understanding the gravity of the request. She led Emma into a small office and pulled out a few old files from a drawer. These files, Carla explained, contained records of all the families and children who had been involved with the center over the years. Emma's heart raced as she looked through the papers. She didn't know what she was expecting to find, but the truth was becoming more and more difficult to ignore. There, in black and white, was Daniel's name, listed as a volunteer, a mentor, and a financial supporter. It was hard to believe that all of this had been happening under her nose, and yet there it was. Daniel had been a quiet but steady presence at the center, offering help to families in need without ever seeking attention or recognition. Carla explained how Daniel had started volunteering at the community center several years ago. He had been drawn to the work they were doing, helping children like Ava, who came from struggling families. He had never wanted anyone to know about his involvement, Carla said, because he believed that doing good deeds didn't require praise. He simply wanted to make a difference, to be there for those who needed it the most. As Emma listened, she felt a mixture of emotions: pride, sadness, and regret. She was proud of Daniel for doing so much good in the world, for making a difference in the lives of people who needed it most. But she couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness that she had never known about it. How had she not noticed? Had she been so caught up in her own world that she missed what was right in front of her? Emma knew that she had to speak to Ava again. She had to understand more about their relationship and what Daniel's role in her life truly had been. She couldn't just walk away from this without knowing the full story. The truth, no matter how painful, was something she needed to face. She couldn't continue living in the shadow of uncertainty. That evening, Emma called Ava's mother, Latoya. She asked if she could meet with her and Ava again to talk more about Daniel and their connection. Latoya agreed, though she sounded hesitant. Emma understood. It couldn't have been easy for Latoya to revisit the past, to bring up memories of someone who had helped her family so much. But Emma knew that this was the only way to truly understand Daniel's life and his impact on others. The next afternoon, Emma drove to the small apartment where Latoya and Ava lived. She had been here before, but this time, it felt different. She wasn't just visiting as Daniel's wife. She was visiting as someone who was trying to uncover the truth, to understand a side of Daniel that had remained hidden for so long. When she arrived, Ava opened the door, her eyes bright but wary. Emma smiled gently, trying to put the girl at ease. As Emma sat down on the couch, she could feel the weight of the moment pressing on her. This wasn't just a casual visit. It was a moment of reckoning. Her heart raced as she looked at Latoya and Ava, both of whom had become part of a story she never expected to be part of. There were so many things Emma wanted to understand, and she hoped this conversation would give her the answers she so desperately needed. Ava sat quietly beside her mother, her small hands clasped together in her lap. Emma could see that the girl seemed both nervous and curious. It was clear that this wasn't just a meeting for her. It was a moment to revisit a part of her life that was tied to someone she had deeply cared for, someone she had lost. Emma could only imagine how difficult this must be for her, but she was determined to get to the truth. Latoya, on the other hand, was calm, though her eyes betrayed a hint of sadness. She smiled faintly as Emma looked at her. "I'm glad you could come by," Latoya said softly. "Ava's been asking about you. About Daniel, too. It's been hard, but we're grateful for everything he did for us." Emma nodded, her throat tightening as she listened to Latoya's words. It was strange, hearing someone else talk about Daniel in such a personal way. Daniel had been hers, her husband, her best friend, her partner. Now here she was, sitting in a stranger's home, trying to understand his secret life. I need to know more about what Daniel did for you," Emma said, her voice shaky but determined. "I didn't know about any of this. Why didn't he tell me?" Latoya looked down, clearly uncomfortable with the question, but she didn't hesitate to answer. Daniel didn't like to make a fuss about things. He wasn't the type to talk about his good deeds. He never wanted to burden you, Emma. He wanted to help without drawing attention to himself. Emma nodded slowly, absorbing Latoya's words. It made sense in a way. Daniel had always been quiet about his kindness, always insisting that it was enough to do good without expecting anything in return. But now, sitting in this room, hearing these words, it felt like a revelation, one that both humbled and confused her. Ava spoke up then, her voice soft but filled with emotion. "He always came to my dance recitals," she said, looking down at her hands. "He promised me that when I got older, he'd help me get into college. I never knew he was doing all this for us because he didn't want anyone to know. He just wanted to help." Emma's chest tightened as she heard Ava's words. She couldn't imagine what it must have been like for the girl to lose someone who had been such an important part of her life. The love Daniel had shown Ava and her mother was something Emma had never expected. She couldn't have known the depth of Daniel's generosity, but now she was beginning to see it. Latoya continued, her voice quieter now. "Daniel believed in second chances. I've been through some hard times, and he always made sure we had what we needed. Sometimes it wasn't even about money. It was about being there for us, about listening when things were tough, or giving Ava the encouragement she needed to keep going." She paused, her eyes softening as she looked at her daughter. "He gave us hope when we had none." Emma could feel the tears welling up in her eyes. It was so overwhelming, hearing about Daniel's impact on their lives. How had she not known? How had she missed the signs? The guilt crept in, but she tried to push it aside. This wasn't about blaming herself. This was about understanding who Daniel had been, who he truly was, and what he had given to others. She took a deep breath and looked at Latoya. "I don't know what to say," Emma admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "I didn't know he was doing all of this. It's a lot to take in." Latoya smiled gently. "It's a lot to take in for us too, Emma, but it's important that you know the truth. Daniel didn't want you to feel overwhelmed by it. He just wanted to be there for us because we needed him. He was a good man, Emma. He cared more than you know." Emma wiped away a tear, her heart aching, as she thought about all the time she had taken Daniel for granted. She had always known he was a kind and loving person, but hearing about how he had quietly supported others made her realize how much more he had done. Ava looked up at Emma, her eyes full of understanding. I think my mom and I are the lucky ones," Ava said softly. "Because Daniel gave us so much, and now we'll always remember him." She smiled faintly, though her eyes were filled with both sadness and gratitude. Emma nodded, a lump forming in her throat. She was grateful for this moment, for this chance to understand the man she had loved so deeply. It wasn't easy, but it was the truth, and even though it stung, it also made her feel closer to him, in a way. The days following Emma's meeting with Latoya and Ava were filled with reflection. The truth about Daniel's secret life had left her feeling both inspired and heartbroken. She had spent so much time in grief, focused on the pain of losing him. But now she was beginning to understand just how much he had given to others. He hadn't been the perfect husband. No one was. But he had been a man of extraordinary compassion, someone who quietly made the world better in ways Emma never even knew. As Emma processed everything, she felt a sense of guilt creeping in. Why hadn't she seen it before? Why hadn't she noticed the signs of Daniel's kindness toward others? But deep down, Emma knew that her questions were unfair. Daniel hadn't wanted her to know, and perhaps that was part of his selflessness. He had kept this part of his life hidden, because he didn't want her to feel overwhelmed or burdened by the truth. Over time, Emma started to feel a shift in her heart. She couldn't change the past, but she could honor Daniel's legacy by carrying on the kindness he had shown to others. She knew now that helping people, especially those who needed it the most, was something that had mattered deeply to him. Emma wanted to make sure that his quiet, generous spirit lived on, even without him physically by her side. One evening, as Emma sat in her living room, she picked up her phone and called Latoya. She wanted to reach out again, to see how they were doing, and perhaps offer some support in return for all that Daniel had given them. After a few rings, Latoya answered, her voice warm and friendly. "Hello, Emma. It's so good to hear from you. How are you?" Emma smiled, her voice steady but thoughtful. "I'm doing okay, just thinking a lot about everything that's happened. And about Daniel. I want to help. I don't know how, but I want to do something for you and Ava, something that might honor him." Latoya's voice softened. "That's kind of you, Emma. You don't have to do anything, really. But I understand. Daniel would have been so proud of you for wanting to help." Emma paused for a moment, letting the words settle in. "I want to start by making a difference in the community, the way Daniel did. Maybe I can help with the community center or some of the projects he was involved in. He believed in what you were doing. I want to carry that on." Latoya was silent for a moment, and Emma wondered if she had said too much. But then Latoya spoke, her voice filled with gratitude. "That's exactly what Daniel would have wanted. He believed in giving without expecting anything in return. You're already doing something amazing by wanting to be part of this. I'm sure he would be happy to know that you're here for us." Emma felt a weight lift off her chest. It wasn't a solution to everything, but it was a step forward. By helping Latoya, Ava, and others in the community, she could create something positive in Daniel's name. It was a way to heal, to channel the grief into something meaningful. Over the next few weeks, Emma spent more time at the community center. She learned about the different programs they offered to families in need, from tutoring and after-school activities for children to financial support for those who couldn't make ends meet. Emma became involved in organizing events and fundraisers, pouring her energy into projects that would make a real difference in the lives of others. She also spent time getting to know Latoya and Ava better, offering them the kind of support and friendship Daniel had given them. Ava, who had once been shy and reserved, began to open up to Emma. They talked about their favorite books, their hopes for the future, and the memories they had of Daniel. As the days passed, Emma found herself developing a bond with Ava that she hadn't expected. She saw in Ava so many of the same qualities that had made Daniel such a special person: kindness, resilience, and a deep desire to make the world better. One afternoon, after a community event, Emma and Ava sat down together on a bench outside the center. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over the parking lot, and the air was crisp with the promise of fall. Ava turned to Emma, a thoughtful expression on her face. Do you think I could ever be like him?" Ava asked, her voice soft but filled with curiosity. "I mean, like how he helped everyone. I want to make a difference too." Emma smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "I think you already are. Ava, you have so much potential, and you're already doing great things by being kind and helping others. Daniel would be so proud of you." Ava smiled back, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. Emma could see the hope in her eyes, and it reminded her so much of Daniel. Ava had the same quiet strength, the same unwavering belief in the power of kindness. Emma knew that, just like Daniel, Ava would go on to do amazing things. As the weeks passed, Emma found herself becoming more and more involved in the community. What had begun as an attempt to understand Daniel's hidden life had turned into something much bigger, something deeply fulfilling. She threw herself into organizing events, helping with the local food bank, and working with the after-school programs that Daniel had been so passionate about. Every day, she was reminded of how much Daniel had quietly given, and how much she now wanted to give back in his honor. Emma spent many afternoons at the community center with Latoya and Ava. She helped the children with their homework, assisted with the meal programs, and even started a small reading group for the younger kids. It was overwhelming at first, but Emma could feel a growing sense of purpose, and she found herself more connected to the people around her than she had ever been before. She'd always been a bit withdrawn, focused on her own life and her marriage. But now she felt like she was part of something bigger, a community that was built on support, kindness, and helping one another. Ava, too, had become more open. Emma noticed how the young girl's eyes sparkled with excitement when she talked about her dreams of becoming a teacher or a social worker, goals that not too long ago seemed distant. It warmed Emma's heart to see Ava so full of hope, so full of potential. Daniel had always believed in her, and now Emma felt the same way. She would do everything in her power to help Ava reach those dreams. One afternoon, as they worked on an art project with the kids at the center, Emma and Latoya took a break and sat down in the small office. Latoya had been a constant support for Emma during this time, and they had grown close. Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude toward her for being there, for showing her what true strength and resilience looked like. "I've been thinking about something," Emma began, her voice tentative. "I know Daniel was really involved in the community, but I think I'd like to do more. Not just for you and Ava, but for everyone. Maybe we could set up a scholarship in Daniel's name. Something for kids who want to go to college, or kids who want to pursue a career in helping others. Just like how Daniel helped Ava." Latoya smiled, her eyes glistening with emotion. "I think that's a beautiful idea, Emma. Daniel would be so proud of you for wanting to carry on his work. He always talked about giving kids the opportunities he never had. A scholarship in his name would be a way to help them, just like he helped us." Emma felt a wave of warmth wash over her. This was exactly what she wanted, to create something lasting, something that would carry Daniel's spirit of kindness forward. She could already picture it, a scholarship that would give kids like Ava the chance to go to college, to follow their dreams, just like Daniel had believed they could. Over the following weeks, Emma began to put the plans for the scholarship in motion. She reached out to local businesses, organized fundraisers, and spoke with community leaders to gather support. The response was overwhelming. People in the town had always known Daniel as a quiet, humble man, and now they were eager to honor his memory. They donated money, offered their time, and helped spread the word about the scholarship. It felt like the whole town was rallying together, united by the memory of a man who had done so much for others without ever asking for anything in return. As Emma worked on the scholarship, she spent more time reflecting on her own life, on her marriage to Daniel, and on what she had learned over the past few months. She had been so caught up in her grief that she hadn't allowed herself to see the full picture of who Daniel had been. But now, with time and space to reflect, she could see just how much he had shaped her life, even in his absence. His selflessness, his commitment to others, and his quiet way of making a difference had left a mark on everyone he met. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when Emma still felt the sharp sting of loss. There were times when she missed Daniel so much that it felt unbearable. But then, she would think of the scholarship, of the kids who would benefit from it, and of the community that had come together to honor him. She realized that through this work, she could heal, piece by piece, and begin to find her own purpose again. One evening, as Emma and Latoya were cleaning up after a community event, Ava approached her. The girl had a shy smile on her face as she handed Emma a small wrapped package. "I wanted to give this to you," Ava said, her voice quiet but sincere. "It's not much, but it's for you, for everything you've done for us." Emma took the package with a smile, her heart full of gratitude. She carefully unwrapped it and found a small framed photo of Daniel. It was a picture of him at one of Ava's dance recitals, clapping proudly from the front row. The day finally arrived when Emma stood before a room full of people at the local community center, preparing to announce the scholarship in Daniel's name. The event was small, but it was filled with meaning. Emma had worked tirelessly for months, organizing fundraisers and gathering support from local businesses, all to create an opportunity for children like Ava to follow their dreams. It was a moment of culmination, a way to ensure that Daniel's legacy would continue to inspire even after his passing. As Emma took the microphone in her hand, her heart pounded with excitement and nerves. She looked around the room, seeing familiar faces from the community, people who had come to support her and the cause that had brought them all together. Latoya sat in the front row, smiling proudly, and Ava was beside her, holding a bouquet of flowers for Emma. They had both become like family to her, and this was a moment they had all worked toward. Emma took a deep breath before she began speaking. "I want to thank each and every one of you for being here today. This scholarship, this opportunity, isn't just for one person. It's for all the people who have been touched by Daniel's kindness and generosity." She paused, her voice catching slightly as she thought about Daniel. He wasn't someone who wanted recognition, but he made such a difference in so many lives. And I hope this scholarship can be a way to honor that, to keep his memory alive, in the most meaningful way possible, by helping others. The room was silent, the audience listening intently as Emma continued. "This scholarship is for those who are passionate about helping others, who want to make a difference in the world, just as Daniel did. It's for kids like Ava, who have dreams bigger than their circumstances, who deserve a chance to reach their full potential. It's for anyone who needs a little bit of support to follow their path." Daniel believed in second chances, and he believed in the power of education to change lives. "I want to carry that belief forward." As Emma spoke, she could see the faces of the people in the room softening. She was struck by how much love and support surrounded her, how much they all cared for Daniel, and how much they wanted to make a difference, just as he had. It wasn't just about the scholarship. It was about the community, coming together to keep his spirit alive in a way that would help others. After she finished speaking, there was a round of applause. Emma felt a wave of emotion wash over her. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was something real, a tangible way to honor Daniel's impact on the world. Latoya and Ava stood up, and Latoya came forward with a small envelope in her hands. "Emma," she said, her voice filled with warmth, "on behalf of all of us, we'd like to present you with something." She handed Emma the envelope, and when Emma opened it, she found a handwritten letter and a check, money to help fund the scholarship even further. "I hope this can help make the scholarship even more successful," Latoya continued, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You've done so much for us, and this is just a small way for us to give back to you, in honor of Daniel." Emma was speechless. She hadn't expected this. She felt overwhelmed by the kindness of these people, by the way they had supported her through everything. It wasn't just about honoring Daniel's memory. It was about building something bigger together, creating a legacy of kindness that would live on through each person involved. "Thank you," Emma whispered, her voice shaky with emotion. She couldn't find the words to express just how much this meant to her. That evening after the event, Emma took a walk by herself. She needed a moment to reflect, to let everything sink in. The sun was setting, casting a soft glow over the town, and Emma walked slowly, her thoughts full of gratitude. She thought about Daniel, about all the years they had spent together, and how he had shaped her life in ways she hadn't even fully realized. He had left her with a gift, a reminder of the power of kindness and love. And now, through this scholarship, she was able to share that gift with others. As she walked, Emma felt a sense of peace. There would always be moments of sadness. She would always miss Daniel, but she had learned to carry his memory with her in a way that was positive and healing. She wasn't just honoring him. She was living out the values he had instilled in her. Emma thought about the future, about all the children who would benefit from this scholarship, all the lives that would be changed because of Daniel's quiet impact on the world. And she realized that, in a way, Daniel had never really left her. His spirit lived on in the people he had touched, in the community that had come together to carry his legacy forward.